Do you know this river? You've driven past it, biked along it, maybe even walked it. But did you know it once caught fire? This river didn't just flow through Toronto's history, it shaped it. This is the story of the Don River, how it helped build a city, and what happened when that city nearly destroyed it. The Don rises from two main branches. The East Branch consisted of the Little Don River in the east, rising from the protected lands of the Oak Ridges Moraine in Richmond Hill, and the German Mills Creek, running parallel before joining the Little Don River near Sills Avenue, north of Toronto. The Western Branch starts in Vaughan, flowing southeast before joining the eastern half about 7 kilometers north of Lake Ontario. The area below the confluence is known as the Lower Don, and the areas above as the Upper Don. Stretching about 38 kilometers all the way to Lake Ontario, the river flows through the Don Valley, a gorge carved 12,000 years ago as the last glaciers retreated. But this isn't a wild river anymore. Over time, it's been rerouted, buried, and reshaped to make room for Toronto's relentless growth. In the 1700s, while named Nichang Kwa Kekong, the river was a thriving waterway for indigenous peoples like the Mississaugas of the Credit and the Huron-Wendat. It offered food, fresh water, and a natural highway through the dense forest. This changed with colonization. In 1787, the deeply problematic Toronto Purchase Treaty was signed. The Mississaugas, believing they were leasing the land, not surrendering it permanently, lost the rights to the territory that would become Toronto and York County. This change in ownership marked the start of an important but damaging period to the river's history, and that would be felt until today. Soon after York's founding, in 1793, Lieutenant Governor Simcoe named the river the Don, inspired by a river with the same name in Yorkshire, England. But the Don would soon take on a character entirely its own. In just a few decades, it transformed from a winding forest waterway into a corridor of industrial ambition. By the 1850s, over 50 mills lined its banks, producing lumber, flour, paper, and more. Industry soon expanded. Petroleum storage yards, meatpacking plants, and tanneries followed. A few years later, the Don Valley Brickworks opened. Its clay-fired bricks shaping the very walls of Queen's Park, University College, and hundreds of homes across the growing city. But what the Don gave to Toronto in power and progress, it paid back in pollution. By the late 19th century, the Don had become a dumping ground. Tannery acids, slaughterhouse runoff, coal ash, and untreated sewage pour into its waters daily. For city officials and industrialists, the river was a convenient solution to a problem. Carry it away and don't ask where it goes. But the consequences weren't invisible. Fish disappeared, riverbanks eroded, and waste choked the current. However, it was not until the river's natural characteristics got in the way of industrial expansion that authorities decided to act. In October 1878, a violent rainstorm overwhelmed the Lower Don. The river burst its banks and tore through surrounding area, flooding the city's eastern core. Bridges were swept away, homes and factories along the valley floor were inundated. Railways were submerged and industry halted. In response, city engineers proposed something drastic: the Don Improvement Project, a sweeping reconfiguration of the river's lower section. The plan, finalized in 1886, aimed to straighten and channel the Don south of Winchester Street to create additional harbor space and industrial dock space for boats. The project also redirected the river east of its original mouth into a new man-made waterway. The straightened river aimed to divert the polluted waterways into the Ashbridges Bay Marsh. However, this was proved unsuccessful, and the mouth was turned 90 degrees west where it emptied in the inner harbor known as the Keating Channel. Although concerns about public health and stagnant water played a role, the driving force behind the Don Improvement Project was industrial ambition. The project was a declaration of dominance over nature. By the early 1900s, the continuous relentless pollution and neglect turned the Don into an environmental disaster. In an effort to address this issue, 31 separate sewage treatment facilities were constructed along the river, and over 20 sites in the valley and adjacent ravines were used as landfills for garbage and industrial refuse. In 1917, the Don Destructor was built beside the river, just north of Dundas Street East. The incinerator operated for 52 years, burning about 50,000 tons of rubbish annually. However, despite the efforts, the Don River had become so drenched in sewage and industrial waste, like oils and tars, that it caught fire on more than one occasion. In 1931, a heavy coating of oil from nearby refineries ignited and destroyed a bridge at Keating Street. Firemen had to pierce the bridge to water the fire underneath. Then, in 1944, another fire broke out along the riverfront near the British American Oil Company's property, scorching several structures before it finally burned out. A turning point came in 1946. A plan by a private company to demolish pioneer dwellings in the area of Todmorden Mills led outraged citizens to form the Don Valley Conservation Association. The association's opposition was successful in causing the company to abandon the project a year later. A growing interest in conservation led to the formation of authorities across Ontario for watershed management. The Don Valley Conservation Authority, or the DVCA, was established in 1947. It had limited powers and was funded by local municipalities which had to pay for specific land purchases. For example, a 1950 plan to build a large conservation area on the East Don River at Milne Hollow at Lawrence Avenue never came to fruition over the high cost of development. In 1954, another major event happened in the city.
Camera crews from CBC Television News worked through the night to bring you this exclusive eyewitness account of Hurricane Hazel.
Hurricane Hazel struck the Toronto area. While the Humber River suffered devastating losses, the Don watershed saw less rain and no fatalities. However, Hazel spurred a watershed management reform. In 1957, the DVCA, along with other Toronto area conservation authorities, was reformed into the Metro Toronto and Region Conservation Authority and given a mandate to construct flood control features as well as acquire property in the Don and other valleys to prevent a future reoccurrence of the disaster. At the same time, the Don Valley Parkway was constructed through the Lower Don to serve growing commuter traffic. The DVP was a large civil engineering project. Homes, farms, and cottages in the valley were expropriated. 2 hills within the valley were leveled and the soil used for grading the highway. The railways and the river were rerouted, and the newly available land allowed for improvements to the Don Mills Road and to the extension of the Eglinton Avenue and Lawrence Avenue concession roads across the valley. But the increasing development reduced the natural areas of the watershed. This impacted the Don with increased pollution, heavy flooding, and turbid sediment-laden waters. By the 1960s, the river remained a neglected, polluted mess. So much so that in 1969, Pollution Probe had a much-celebrated funeral for the Don to sound the alarm. But the efforts to restore the Don would only gain momentum 2 decades later. In 1989, after a public forum at the Ontario Science Centre, attended by about 500 people, was formed the Task Force to Bring Back the Don, a citizens' advisory board to the Toronto City Council. Their mandate and vision was to make the Don fully usable, accessible, and safe. Since then, they have hosted garbage cleanups, tree planting, and helped to create or restore 8 wetlands in the lower reaches of the valley. In 1991, the task force released a document called Bringing Back the Don, outlining restoration plans, which included a renaturalized mouth of the Don. This became part of Toronto's 1998 Waterfront Revival Initiative. In the following years, environmental assessment studies were conducted to look into a new natural mouth for the Don. The project was also coupled with a plan to handle a major flood, modeled on the expected output from a Hurricane Hazel-sized storm. In 2007, The Toronto Waterfront Development Corporation, now Waterfront Toronto, held a design competition that looked at 4 different configurations for the mouth of the Don. A winning bid was selected and construction began in 2016. In 2025, Waterfront Toronto announced that it had completed the project, connecting the Don River to the new mouth channel, along with the creation of a new island, Uquimmin-Minising. For the first time in almost 150 years, the Keating Channel was no longer the primary outlet for the river into the Toronto harbor. Today, the Don flows through a city that often overlooks it, but its resilience is undeniable. Its banks now hum with life. A growing network of trails invites cyclists and walkers to explore the valley's green heart. The transformed Don Valley Brickworks stands as a celebrated historical site and a vibrant cultural park, and revitalization projects continue to renaturalize its shores. Its hidden history whispers beneath bridges and parkways, reminding us that the past is never truly erased. It simply waits to be remembered, and sometimes restored. If you've never walked the Don's trails or explored the brickworks, perhaps it's time to discover this hidden architect of Toronto. Share your memories below, and if you're fascinated by the places that built the city, subscribe.